Okay, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Goldstone Caregiver Center and Faith Community Nurse Program, I want to welcome you all to today's presentation by Stacie McLaughlin, Fall Prevention in the Home and the Community. Stacie grew up in Danbury and was an accomplished athlete throughout the years, including competing in the Junior Olympics for track. As a fun fact about Stacie, she has passed on her passion and athletic skills to her son, who as a junior in college is active in a ninja warrior competitions and is a coach for younger ninja athletes. Stacie graduated from Southern Connecticut State University with degrees in public and community health and physical education, and received her allied health degree in physical therapy at University of Connecticut. She has combined her love of athletics and physical therapy to provide skills to patients and families to ensure their safety at home and in the community. Stacie has an extensive work history in a variety of rehabilitation, physical therapy, and sports medicine organizations. And she started working at Western Connecticut Home Care in 2013 and was promoted to Therapy Supervisor in 2016. Today, we are so pleased to have Stacie talk to us about fall prevention, both in the home and the community. Stacie, thank you for being here, and I'll turn the program over to you.
Okay, excuse me. Thank you for having me. So when I first started to do this, I thought it was just going to be the home, and then I realized we were doing it in the community as well. So some of the slides will have a little bit of both, but because fall risks are in the home as well as the community, it's kind of just a reset on all of those. So why are falls something to be concerned about? So falls become more common in people as they age, and in the age 65 and older group, they're the leading cause of injury in that age group. Falls in all ages can result in serious consequences, including pain, impaired function due to injuries, whether it be skin tears, bruises, or as well as fractures. And the other thing that it will do is it tends to reduce confidence level in people in certain activities. So perhaps they were walking outside, they slipped up, they fell. That person potentially could be a little bit more scared to go outside and walk in the community or walk in different places. I've had patients that no longer want to walk in a particular walking area because that's where they fell. Unfortunately, with that loss, with that fear that comes into that and that loss of confidence, there's also tends to be a loss of independence and autonomy. And obviously, some falls can lead to death after serious injuries. So it's really important to come up with some strategies to allow everybody to be safe in their home, safe outside of their home, and to be able to participate in any of the activities that they need to. Falls are also now being used as a predictor for admission to long-term care. And it's something for insurance companies that are looking at, as well as if somebody wanted to go into an assisted living, because the cost of people that have falls, even if they have one fall, it increases their risk factors for a lot of other things. So as a result of that, they may not be admitted into some long care plans, and some insurance companies may have issue with them as well, and therefore increase their rate for insurance. A lot of the information that I'm going through have been through some of the courses that I've gone to, and I use a lot with the Oswego program, where they really specifically studied the reasonings for why people have an increased fall risk. And it comes with diminished strength, flexibility, balance, and most of all, reaction time. Little kids, first of all, they're smaller, lower to the ground. So when they start to lose their balance, they can get down to the ground pretty quickly. And their reaction time as they become teenagers is much greater than somebody that's 65, 70 or older. So as a result, having strength, having that flexibility, and having that ability to balance even on uneven areas is going to dramatically decrease their likelihood of falling if they can catch themselves. Environmental factors, obviously uneven terrain, slippery or icy surfaces. And one thing that a lot of people do not consider is low lit areas. So we all have that hallway or that room that we're just going to run into in the home, and we're not going to turn the light on. And that low light, they may not see the thing that fell on the ground, and they step on it. They don't know what it is. Was it a cat's tail? Was it something else? And as a result, they stumble. If they don't have that reaction time and that balance, that's going to increase their likelihood of falling. And the other thing is non-supportive footwear. And this can be those slippers, or what you see outside is the people that are walking in their slides where only their toes are covered and they're going on slippery surfaces. All of that will contribute to their possibility of loss of balance. Other contributing factors are obviously multitasking. So I'm one of those people in my home where I have a lot of things I want to do it all at the same time. So I know where everything is in my house, but I may forget that I just put something down there and I go around the corner really quickly. That increases your risk of falling. Taking multiple medications, especially if you're given new medications, though that in itself will also increase your likelihood of getting dizzy or having a reaction to that, or making you feel drowsy. And that again is you're not going to be as attuned to your surroundings. Having a sedentary lifestyle, as I explained before, a loss in strength, flexibility, and balance, all of that is a contributing factor of having a sedentary lifestyle. When they've done studies on Olympic athletes, which are obviously high-level athletes, not mere mortals like us, when they do not work out for 2 weeks, they lose 50% of their muscle tone. We that just kind of do day-to-day things obviously are not working at that higher caliber. So if we are sedentary, we have a reduction in our muscle mass and our strength at a much quicker rate than somebody that's a high-level athlete. The other things that we need to consider when we're going in and we're working with patients is, what are their multiple medical conditions or diseases that they might be dealing with? Maybe they have Parkinson's, maybe they have had pneumonia, and as a result of that, they're more deconditioned. All of these things factor into, do they have a higher fall risk? And then obviously prior falls. And as I had noted before, if you want to be able to go into an assisted living facility or you want long-term insurance, they're looking at that history of falls. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody answers those questions correctly, but if you had a fall, that increases that rate. Other concerns, again, as I said, a history of falls, but vision loss. So again, as we age, our vision changes. Sometimes it changes so that we have to wear glasses for reading. So we're wearing those and we're running across the room or walking fast across the room to get something. Your depth perception is going to be different than somebody that doesn't wear glasses and isn't having that same issue with reading to just regular walking for nearsightedness. The other thing is we get macular degeneration, cataracts, and other things that could occur to your vision. And with that, you're at a higher risk because you may not see things, especially if you have a depth perception. You may not be able to see the same thing somebody else is going to avoid tripping. Hearing loss is a big thing, and everybody always says, oh, well, when you get older, you lose your hearing. But what they don't realize is when you are shut off from the outside world, you don't hear the cars coming, you don't hear an animal coming up behind you, you might not hear a person coming up behind you, depending on what the hearing loss is. And as a result of that, you may get startled. And if you don't have that reaction time to get yourself back from that, you're going to have a greater likelihood of falling. As well as hearing does affect your balance in general. So people that have had a history of vertigo, a lot of that might come off of even having an ear infection. Any of those things that affect your hearing will affect your balance. Sensory deficits other than that are people that have peripheral neuropathy or other issues where they may not know what their foot is doing when it hits the ground. So we're walking and there are people that they honestly don't know if their heel touched first or their toe touched first. And as a result of that, they may be shuffling their foot on the ground and therefore increasing their likelihood of falling. I mentioned medications before, but medication side effects, those all interact with each other too. So making sure that if you're given new medications, you're talking to your pharmacist, or if you have home care or a nurse or somebody involved, your doctor, talk to them about, are there going to be interactions with those medications that are going to affect my balance? High or low blood pressure is another thing that's going to cause unsteadiness. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, where I'm going to discuss some activities that you can do if you've been sitting for a long period of time, so that when you get up, you don't feel that lightheadedness where you feel unsteady. And then balance and gait deviations. And these can be from, the way that the foot type that you have. I do have my background is foot and ankle specialty, and I do orthotics. So as a result of that, I tend to watch how everybody walks, and I can pretty much tell who's walking down the hall before they get to my office based off of how their feet sound. So all of that will lead to the potential for a fall risk based off of the type of footwear, as well as the deviations that they may or may not have. If I'm talking too fast, I apologize. I'm trying to get a lot of information in. So if we go specifically to the home, we mentioned some of these things before. So in likelihood of increasing falls in your home, you're looking at low lighting. So putting night lights in, and those little LED lights they're really inexpensive, but just putting them in the hallways that you may or may not want to turn on a light and having them on, it's not going to run a lot of battery drainage. But I see a lot of older adults that don't want to turn on a lot of lights because, it costs a lot with electricity, and everybody knows that electricity prices have gone up. So as a result, they are keeping their lights off. So having this little LED night light in there is so that they're not waking up in the dark, or they're not walking down a dark hallway. It increases their safety. Looking at scatter and throw rugs. And a lot of people will say, well, it has a rubber backing. It might have a rubber backing, but your foot might catch the lip of it. So making sure that those edges are really secured down, especially in the bathroom. I know a lot of people just throw down a towel to step on. So now you have a wet person on a towel on a tile, which is going to increase your likelihood of falling. So that goes along with the slippery surfaces. It's a simple thing, but if you spill something, try to pick it up, because you might not remember it later on when you're answering the phone and running for the animal. Uneven surfaces. A lot of older houses will have the uneven hardwood floor, or if you go out on the deck or the sidewalk where we put a lot of salt down so that we're not going to slip on the ice, but now it's a little bit more uneven, or chewed it up a little bit. All of that increases your fall risk. Pets, as much as we love them, they love to get underneath our feet. So that's another thing, just knowing, where our pets are and what we can handle. If we're moving a lot of things around in our house, you don't really want your pets around at the same time, because they're going to be under your foot as you're carrying a big box. And then clutter. I like to call them horizontal bookcases. So, we have our bookcases that we're supposed to do horizontal. Well, a lot of people will just pile things up vertically. So now you have a vertical bookcase sitting on the side of your table or on the side of the floor. And all it takes is one little bump and everything goes down, and that increases your likelihood of slipping on that. When those vertical bookcases are on the stairs, it becomes even worse. So, now they have these little baskets that you can put on the stairs, where I see a lot of people tend to trip, especially going down the stairs more so than going up the stairs. In the community, again, low lighting, making sure that when you go to a parking lot, you're looking for a place to park that is by light. So you might go into the store when it's still sort of light out, but now it's winter time and it's 5 o'clock. And by the time you walk out of that store, it's going to be dark. Did you pay attention to the fact that there might have been a pothole in that parking lot at the time that you were going in? Those are the kinds of things you want to be paying attention to. So we have to be a little bit more alert to decrease our fall risk. Unfamiliar areas. So, going on vacation and you're walking around different places, you may not know that that has a piece of asphalt that, is kind of falling apart, and you step on it and lose your balance. Again, same thing with uneven terrain. Sometimes just walking on the grass, you may not know that there's a hole within the grass. You may not know that there's, a hole because the grass was mowed, and so everything looks even, and it may not be, and your foot goes in there. Curbs and parking lot cement blocks are another big thing. Sometimes they're more narrow than the car. So or one end might be, but the other side may not be. And they may be painted the same color as that pavement or that cement. And so I see a lot of people trip with that. And the other thing that people trip on a lot are curb cuts. So the ADA had said that you really should have a different color at the curbs where the curb cuts down. But there are a lot of places around here, including a lot of apartment buildings, grocery stores, where they have a curb cut and there's no difference in the color. And I've had medical buildings, I've had patients walking into a medical building that have fallen walking in there because they didn't realize that one was a curve down and the other one was a step up, and they tripped right over it while going to the orthopedic doctor, which was not a good thing. They went in with a lot more injuries than they thought they were going in for. Again, same thing with slippery or sticky areas. You know, a lot of people don't think about the fact that, okay, well, now I stepped on gum, great. And then they step on a leaf, and then they step on a tile. So all of that in combination can increase the likelihood of slipping. And when you go into a grocery store, you have to look around because you never know what somebody else spilled that maybe didn't get cleared up. The more people around, obviously, during the pandemic, we weren't going out, but now more and more people are going out. So the areas that you're going, if you're going to the mall or the supermarket, they're a lot busier than they were. And there's a good likelihood that, you know, if you're in a crowded area, you potentially are going to get jostled. If your balance is not great, you could lose your balance and fall at that point. And then, as I mentioned before, wet leaves are just as slippery as ice, sometimes more, because at least with ice, you know it's coming, but with a wet leaf, you may not. Snow, puddles, holes in the grass, dirt, or pavement. So some safety tips. In general, everybody should have emergency numbers near their phone. Now, that's great when we have a phone sitting at our house, but most people use their cell phones now. So one of the easiest things to do is if you put in your phone as ICE, which is in case of emergency, that ICE number, you put that in a contact, comes up even if you can't unlock your phone. They can unlock under ICE, and that will have an emergency contact so that if you've fallen and you have your cell phone with you, you can still, you know, reach your emergency contact, or somebody else could reach that emergency contact if you were injured to a point where you wouldn't be able to contact them. Along with that, some people, especially if they get older, especially if they have an increased fall risk, they should have one of those alert buttons. I've fallen and I can't get up. I've gone into many homes that they have this beautiful little hook that they hang it on when they go to bed, and then they get out of bed and they fall, but it's still up there and they can't get up onto the bed to get it. So, you know, just reminding, if you have somebody that really is in need of wearing one of those, they even have them in watch form now, but having something so that they can make sure that they can address that and push that button, because it does no good if it's sitting up on a hook off the wall and they can't get to it because they're on the floor. Then another is just cleaning up the areas in the home that you're going to, you know, kind of trying to keep an area that's open, that then there's less clutter, there's less likelihood that you're going to potentially slip onto something or knock something down. Removing your throw rugs, using carpet tape to secure them. A lot of people do not like to, you know, tape things down, but the carpet tape that they have now is pretty good, and it doesn't even mess up the hardwood flooring. Secure cords and wires so that you're not walking around them or walking over them. Remember, the other thing, even though it's not the fall risk, if you've got a cord underneath a carpet, it could fray and you don't know that because you keep walking over that carpet. And even though there's a little bump, it's not a big bump. But if you fray that, it may cause a spark, which could cause other issues. So it's really important to just make sure that the cords are secured in a way that you're safe and everybody else in the house is safe as well. When you walk into stores, pay attention to where those cords are, because a lot of times they may have different cords going different places, and it may seem out of the way, but if you took a corner quickly, sometimes those cords are not out of the way. As I mentioned before, using night lights, especially where you're walking at night or in a dark room, so that you make sure that if you get up out of bed, you can see where things are. And even though there might not have been things in the way, so you thought when you went to bed, when you wake up, you may have forgotten that you put that book or those slippers there. Installing sturdy railings and grab bars as needed. And I see a lot of people, they'll put a grab bar in the bathroom, or they'll use that shower towel bar, and that's only in drywall, so it's really not secure. So if that person really was losing their balance and they pull on that, first of all, the little bar is probably going to fall off the little brackets, or the whole thing is going to come out of the wall. So making sure that if you are installing any railings or grab bars, especially railings going upstairs, I notice that a lot of times in basement steps, they will just put it in drywall. And if it's not in a stud, it's coming out if that person loses their balance going down those stairs. I'm guilty of this next one, using a step stool with a handle versus a chair to reach items. I stand on my chair all the time, but I do turn it around so that the back of it's closest to whatever I'm standing on, because I cannot reach any of my higher cabinets. But it is important to make sure that if you're going to step on a chair like I do, please make sure that you have the strength and the balance to be able to do that. Otherwise, you really should be using a step stool. The little stools that they have in doctor's offices, you can get those online now, and you can attach a bar to them because they all come with that little extra thing. So it does make it safer if somebody's going to step on something like that. The other thing is using assistive devices if necessary. So what I see is when people use crutches, they are more dangerous than any other device, because a lot of people do not know how to use crutches. For some reason, teens do pretty well with it. But when they get older, they don't do so well with it either. So it's really important to making sure that they've got the proper assistive device for what it is that they need. So a cane may or may not be the best thing for them, depending. And in that case, that's where you really want to reach out to a physical therapist or somebody that's going to give them the proper advice as to what they need for an assistive device. And then the next is getting up slowly after sitting for a prolonged period of time, even if you're sitting in a car. So a lot of people, they take their hour trip and they just get out of the car really quick. Well, they haven't drank a lot of fluid because they didn't want to have to stop to go to the bathroom. So that's another issue that we'll get into. And then they get up really quickly and they wonder why they're lightheaded. So sitting there for a few seconds, even just doing some alternating marching, which again, we'll talk about later, anything to kind of get your blood pressure where it needs to be before you just stand up quickly. Again, knowing where your pets are to avoid tripping, clearing your walkways of ice, snow, debris, leaves, all of that. Getting your vision checked regularly, especially as you get into your 50s. That's when people will have more issues with nearsighted issues, as well as the cataracts, and therefore you may not have that same depth perception. Be careful of the spills and park in lighted areas, especially lately. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things going on in parking lots. So just making sure that you're looking at your surroundings before you get out of your car and before you leave a store. And it's sad that you have to say this, but what you really need to do is make sure that if you do not feel comfortable walking out of a store, walk back in that store and get a manager or somebody to walk you out. Or in some cases, they do have a security officer. Those are really important things. Anytime you go to a medical office, there's usually some type of security officer as well. So if you're ever, I tell people, follow your gut. If you ever feel that you're not comfortable going out of a place, then you should really go back in and get somebody to walk you there. Another thing that I learned when I went to school at Southern, I lived in New Haven for 5 years. And as a freshman, they had an orientation and they said that people should back into parking spots. And I didn't understand why, and I never did before that. But they mentioned that if you ever were in an uncomfortable position and you wanted to get out of that parking spot, what happens is you get in there and now you put it into reverse. And in order to go the opposite direction, you now need to shift gears. And that gives opportunity for your car to be stopped. And I don't want to alert anybody, but it's just that you should be able to do where you can just pull out of the parking spot. So most people know me, I do not pull into parking spots forward. I always back into my parking spots. So if you're not really good at backing up, practice with no cars around you first. But it is a safer thing to be able to just pull out of a parking space, especially if you needed to get out in a hurry. So overall, what can you do to reduce your fall risk? So I mentioned earlier the Oswego study, and in there, they mentioned the guidelines I'm giving you right now is a lot of what they were talking about as well, which is exercising 3 times a week at least, but making sure there's a rest day in between. So many of us have heard, oh, I lift weights on this day, I do cardiovascular on this day, I do weights on this day, and they switch it off and they don't really have a full rest day. Well, our bodies do need time to repair. So muscles need that time to be able to rebuild. So lifting weights all the time or doing the same type of activity every single day is not necessarily, especially if it's with a lot of exertion, it's not the best thing to do every day because your body needs to recover. Exercises should include flexibility, should include strengthening and balance. Another thing that, again, we should all be drinking our weight in ounces, half of our weight in ounces. So if you weigh 100 pounds, then you should be drinking at least 50 ounces of, I think I just did that backwards, the opposite way. Sorry. If you weigh 100 pounds, you should double that and have that in ounces for water. So you have to make sure that you're well hydrated. A lot of people say, I don't want to drink a lot because then I have to go to the bathroom. But that actually helps for the other thing, which is that you should be getting up and walking frequently anyway. So if you have to go to the bathroom, then that forces that. Eating a healthy diet, including complex carbs and proteins. There's all sorts of diets out there, but the best diet is making sure that you're getting a little bit of everything, provided that you can with different, diet restrictions for health reasons. And then walking regularly. If you're safe to walk on your own, then you should be able to be getting out there and walking at least 30 minutes twice a week. And that's at the bare minimum. We really should be trying to work toward 30 minutes twice a week. And although I just mentioned earlier that you should be exercising 3 times a week, that doesn't include walking. Walking is a different thing. You should be trying to walk every day. So how do you exercise? So the first thing you do is you talk to your doctor. So you may not have any comorbidities or any issues. So as a result of that, your primary care doctor is the person you would want to talk to. But if you have arthritis, or you have a knee injury or a hip injury or a back injury, or you have cardiac issues or respiratory issues, you should really talk to them and let them know that you're really interested in making sure that you can get a program going so that you can get stronger and you can get more flexible. And then they can send you to the person that can help you set up a program that's going to be safest for you. That no pain, no gain is not something anybody should follow. Yes, sometimes some exercises are going to cause a little discomfort. It should not cause pain. You should usually exercise within a pain-free range, and you should, throughout the entire thing, maintain good posture. Because if you're using your muscles to get them stronger, but you're using them in the wrong positioning, then you could potentially increase your likelihood of injury. Do not hold your breath or overexert yourself. So holding your breath decreases the likelihood of getting oxygen to the muscle spindles. And it's really important for that to occur so that you can get those muscles to break down a little bit the way they're supposed to, and then rebuild stronger. Again, obviously, it doesn't need to be said, but if you feel any dizziness, any chest pain, sudden shortness of breath, I mean, if you're walking up a hill, you might be short of breath a little, but I'm talking sudden onset of shortness of breath, or any muscle aches that does not ease or go away. In those cases, yes, you should stop exercising and obviously get back to the doctor in regard to that. The key is start slowly, listen to your body, and set realistic goals. You could have a goal, I want to run a half marathon, or I want to be able to walk in the 5K. And then somebody asks you, when is that 5K you're talking about? And you say, oh, it's this Saturday. Well, there's a good likelihood you're not going to be in shape to be able to do that. And that's not to say you won't be able to do it, but you are probably going to be pretty sore afterwards if you've not done anything to build up to that. So now I've broken it down into the different programs. Oswego talks about a walking program that the goal is, again, aiming to walk for 30 minutes twice a week. And this was for a lot of people that they had in their program that were 70 and above. But there are some people that can't walk for 30 minutes, or they don't have the time to walk for 30 minutes in a week at a time. So break it down, start it in 5-minute intervals or 10-minute intervals. The key when you're walking for the walking program is to walk at a pace where you're able to hold a conversation. You're not breathless, but you're still getting a relatively good, workout. It should be a relatively normal pace. This is not race walking. This is not, okay, I'm gonna, really, I need to get my heart rate to a certain time. This is, everybody should be walking just for one, to not be sedentary, but just to keep those muscles going and making sure that we're maintaining our proper posture while we're doing it. One of the things that you can do is monitor your heart rate. So checking your pulse, people can check it at their wrist, people can check it at their neck. Most every pharmacy now has a pulse ox that you can get for, I don't know, probably the last time I saw them, they were $20, $30. But that can tell you what is your oxygen saturation rate, as well as what is your heart rate. And when you're doing that, when you're looking at your heart rate, you're not just looking at, did I get it to a certain level, but we want to see, did you let it recover in a certain amount of time? So you may start at 70 and now you're walking around the parking lot and you get it to 112. Well, when you stop 10 minutes later, are you still at 112? Because that's not a great thing. Or have you been able to recover, get it back to pretty close to 70 within 5 minutes, within 2 minutes? Those are parameters that you can use to determine, can I do more? Can I go a little bit faster? And you will notice that your resting heart rate will change, as well as how long it takes to have your heart rate go up as your exertion changes. So the strengthening program, I usually suggest for all of my patients that they perform all their exercises near a sturdy surface. So I like the sink because in most homes, it's not going to move, or a really heavy chair, not one on wheels, because that's going to just set you up for a fall. Perform a warm-up of walking prior to performing the exercises. And when you're walking, making sure that you're swinging your arms and you're, getting those legs, the muscles warmer. By doing that, you're going to allow your muscles to get the good oxygen, and now they'll be ready to start strengthening. You don't want to just start with the exercises. The other thing that you might see if you're looking in the news, and they'll talk about dynamic warm-ups. And dynamic warm-ups are great, and they are a wonderful thing for sports teams. I work with a gymnastics and a ninja center, going down there and setting up dynamic programs for them and strengthening programs for them. And what I would have them do is a totally different thing that I would have many of my patients do, or even some of my friends, because of the type of activity that they have to get into. So again, that is something that you can ask a physical therapist, a personal trainer, and I'll talk about the differences in that in a little bit. Build up to multiple sets. What I tell my patients is to do 5 repetitions on each leg or each arm. Even if one is a little bit weaker than the other, you still have 2. So you really, if you have 2, you should be doing that. The other reason that I have everybody start with 5 repetitions is the old adage everybody said, oh, 3 sets of 10 for, 3 times a day. Well, I did a study where I had patients that had total hip replacements and total knee replacements. I broke them into 2 different groups, the same amount of the same type of surgery in either group. In one group, I had them do 3 sets of 10, 3 times a day. And then in the other group, I had them pick one exercise an hour, do 5 repetitions on each limb. And then the next hour, they pick a different exercise until they finished all the exercises. Each group had 5 exercises to do. I checked at the 3rd visit. At the 3rd visit, the group that had the 3 sets of 10 could barely remember all of them, and certainly not by name. The group that had to do 1 exercise every hour and only 5 repetitions, first of all, they did all of their exercises because everybody can do 5. Whereas the 3 sets of 10, 3 times a day, takes 15 minutes sometimes, and nobody wants to spend 15 minutes at a time. So at the ending of the first week of the 3rd visit, already I had 90% of the people that were doing 5 repetitions doing all their exercises correctly. I only had 60% of them doing their exercises and most of them not doing it correctly. By the ending of 2 weeks, the people that were doing 5 repetitions all of them were doing it 100% correct and following through with it. Whereas at the ending of 2 weeks, I only got up to 80% on the other team. So for me, that changed how I gave my patients exercises to do, because most everybody agreed that they could do these exercises because you could incorporate them into things that you do in your daily life. So I always tell patients 5 repetitions each leg and then go from there. As you get stronger, you can add handheld weights. You can add the cuff weights if you need to. If you have balance issues, please do not put cuff weights. Don't hold on to weights because that's just going to increase your likelihood of falling. Some of the exercises, if you're not strong enough or you're not able to stand, you can still do exercises in sitting and just maintaining proper posture, and you can still do well with that. And then again, do not continue any activity that causes pain, because that's not the outlook we're looking for. Okay, so I wanted to go over some of the exercises. So the first one is marching. And again, I make sure that everybody maintains really good posture. Whenever you're doing any of these exercises, I suggest that people hold on with both hands. First, if they're okay with it and they've got pretty good balance, they can go to one hand, and then eventually with no hands. But when they're first starting, I usually suggest everybody hold on, and I like a sync because it doesn't move. So marching is just that, marching, bringing your knees up. I always call it puppet strings. So if you had a puppet string connected to your knee, you want to pull your knee up, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your ankle and your foot go behind you. It should really be underneath your knee so that you're only using the quad muscles. Okay. The next one is knee bends, or what's called partial squats. But when I say that I want somebody to do squats, they usually say, oh, squats hurt, I don't like to do them. So we squat every single day that we get up and out from a chair, from the toilet. All of those things require a squat. So practicing it that way, and I'm going to show some diagrams in a little bit, practicing the squats the proper way will help you get those muscles stronger. Your glute muscles, your butt muscles, are the muscles that actually really help your balance more so than all these other exercises we're doing. But if you get your glute muscles strong, then your balance is going to be better. The gymnast that you see on that balance beam, she's not using her thigh muscles to keep her on that balance beam. She's using those glutes to keep her on that balance beam. The side leg raise or a hip abduction, we'll go over and I'll show you the picture on that one there. That again is going to use still your glute muscles, but it's a side glute muscle that also helps with balance. And then calf raises. So when we're walking, we don't actually use our calf muscle. It's the ground reaction force that's pushing our heel up. It's because we're going forward. That's the reason why. So making sure that we're using our calf muscles by doing this exercise particularly increases your ability to balance. Okay, because we don't use that same muscle in that same way when we're doing, when we're just walking. So here's your heel raises, or what people call calf raises. So again, you're going straight up. You want to think of taking the top of your head and bringing it toward the ceiling versus bringing it forward. Okay, and you're just pushing up. The other thing to consider is, did your ankles roll out to the side slightly, or did they maintain that exact positioning where they are? So that's when you're doing this, you want to do any of these activities where you're really concentrating on maintaining the proper posture throughout. So here's the hip abduction, or that side kicking. When you're doing this one, your knees and your feet should be facing straight ahead. Your body should be upright. Okay, and you're kicking out. I usually have the person do 5 on one leg and then 5 on the other leg, because when you tend to alternate legs one after the other on this one here, you tend to do a lot of shifting of your body this way versus using the muscles that we want to use. Here's your partial squat. And if somebody is afraid that they're going to fall, putting a chair in front of them while they've got the chair behind them will be helpful. But you want to think of the cue that I give all my patients is, and it works better with females than males, is if you are in a porta potty, you do not want to touch anything, but you need to go to the bathroom. So you have to hover over the porta potty, and you do not want to pee on your ankles. So if you think of doing that, there is no way you can let your knees go in front of your toes that way. Otherwise you would pee on your ankles. So they tend to get that much quicker when I give them that cue. And a lot of them call this pot squats instead of partial squats. but as long as I remember how to do it correctly, I'm okay. When you bring your knees too far forward over your toes, that's when you're going to aggravate your knees further. Knee flexion, and I call these butt kicks because that's pretty much what you're doing. You're trying to bring your heel toward your butt and going nice and slow. So any of these exercises should always be done slowly so that you can control them. And here's your marching. So when you're doing marching, same thing. This picture doesn't have somebody holding on, but you can stand sideways at the sink and hold on so that you can alternate your legs each time. For this one, I do alternate it because when we walk, we do alternate. Okay, so flexibility. I did not show any pictures for flexibility, but this is really important and is more important to do after you work out than before you work out. And the reason for that is, again, those muscle spindles are now ready to work. And so they're going to elongate, and without the little micro tearing going on, they can elongate and then maintain that longer pliability of that muscle. With that, when you're doing any of these exercises, you do not want to bounce. So back in the 70s and the 80s, Jane Fonda did all those, exercises, and everybody was pulsing and bouncing, and that led to potential injuries. Although it'll keep me busy, I would prefer not to have anybody tearing a muscle because they're doing bouncing to try to achieve a position. The same thing is when you're doing it, you have to maintain good posture throughout all of this, and making sure that you're stretching your neck, your back, your hips, legs, shoulders, and arms so that you're stretching everything after you've worked out. Holding each position for approximately 30 seconds is the best way to affect a change in the length of that muscle. The longer the muscle, the better it can perform through the full motion. Therefore, you decrease your likelihood of injury. And again, stretching should feel like a stretch, not pain. If it's pain, you need to back off a bit of it. So the balance program, when you're doing a balance program, same thing as with the strengthening, start with two hands, go to one hand, alternate, switch the other hand, and then try to go with no hands. A lot of the exercises that we do with this one here, I start everything statically. So, and then you move to a dynamic, which means that you're going to do the same activity, but now you're going to create a challenge in it where you're reaching for something. Again, maintaining the proper posture throughout, and making sure that if you start to lose your balance, put your foot down if you were on one foot, or readjust your feet and your legs to make sure that you can maintain the proper posture and the balance. Again, holding on with a stable surface. And then the other thing that you can do is you put both feet together. So now you decrease your center of balance. And as a result, you increase your risk of falling or your challenge for balance. So I like counters for this, walking forward, walking backwards, using the counter for support. As you get better, then you do it without anything. Make sure there's no rugs around because that will increase your fall risk. Walking in tandem, so heel to toe. And it's not just for the police if they pull you over. So, but just making sure that you're doing that. Standing on one leg. So a lot of times I'll have patients start with standing on one leg. They're holding on with both hands. I have them put one hand down, then bring that hand back up with the other hand down, and then try to do it without. Toe walking, as we talked about, when you were walking, you're not really using that calf group, but if you're up in your tippy toes, you are, and that's really challenging your balance. Heel walking, this is a biggie that it's really important. There's not a lot of motion in your ankles, but it's really important that if you're going to do this, please start it with somebody behind you. Because when you lift those heels up and you try to walk on your heels, you have a greater likelihood of falling backwards. And falling backwards is the number one way people fall when they're not like on an uneven terrain. Backward tandem walking, so the same thing. Now what you're going to do is toe to heel instead of heel to toe. Sidestepping, so you're walking, again, you're going to use those muscles on the side of your hips, which are going to help your balance. What I call step tap, if you have steps in your house, hold onto the railing and alternate your foot. Tap your foot on the step, tap the other foot on the step. Progress with, to alternating if you can't do it alternating right from the beginning. And then another thing is picking up items from the floor. So if you've got a bad back, You can use the golfer's pickup where you just kick one leg out, but you might want to be holding on for that one. Or you can do a squat. Again, now it depends on, can you do a squat to pick something up from the ground? If you're having difficulty with any of those things, that's when it's really important to kind of, do I need to meet with a physical therapist? Do I need to meet with somebody that can help me get a program going? So the key is where to start. So there are a few tests that you can just do easily at home. How long can you balance with your feet together? How long can you balance with your eyes closed? How long can you balance on one leg? How many repetitions of any of the exercises I just went over can you guys do? Can you do 5 comfortably, maintaining your proper posture? The key is, and I see a lot of this, oh, well, they were able to do 3 sets of 5, but it's your program. So you've set up your realistic goals, and the idea is to get stronger, get more flexible, and improve your balance overall. So everybody's going to have a different starting point. We have a program that we're giving to a lot of our patients where we would do a few different tests to determine where are they, and then we would chart their progress each week, and they were able to chart their own progress as well to determine whether or not, where are they improving? Oh, look at now I can do this, or I can walk this far, or I can stand on one leg for 30 seconds now. The other thing that we were having them do is if they had a fall, they noted the date of the fall and what were they doing at that time. Now, did they have a second fall? Is there a trend? So all of those things are going to decrease your likelihood of falling because you're going to be paying attention to that. So other resources to consider. You want to make sure that you're talking to your doctor before starting any program. You want to consult with a physical therapist, especially if you've had any injuries in the past, or you're just really nervous about doing this because you have a history of bad back or you have a balance issue. A personal trainer that's certified through NASM or ASI. NASM is the National Academy of Sports Medicine. It was created by a physical therapist, and he designed it in such a way that it was not just let's go to a weekend course and now charge people $100 to go into their home for an hour. He really uses a lot of the strategies that we just talked about. And then my favorite book, and I've been using this since I was in school for physical education, was Stretching by Bob Anderson, which you can still find. And it's a wonderful book. Any type of exercise that you need, it breaks it down to, you want to go mountain biking? Here's stretches you should do for that. So that is the stretching book that I tell everybody. So any questions?
Stacy, this is really great information, and I know I'm going to utilize a lot of it. 4 years ago, I fell, broke one foot, and got out of the boot and fell and broke the other foot. So
remember that? Oh.
yeah. So for me, I'm always looking down as I walk.
You want to look a little ahead. When you look straight down, you can't see what's coming up. So you increase your risk of falling, plus you're leaning forward more.
Right.
So now you're outside of your center of mass. So it's really important to look about 3 to 6 feet ahead of you so you can see what's coming versus straight down. By doing that, you maintain your shoulders over your hips, and therefore you decrease your likelihood of forward propulsion.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I see there was a comment in the chat that says, teach people how to use Siri to call emergency numbers from just your voice.
That's a good point. If they have Siri or if they have Hey Google, both of those guys can do that as well. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Stacy?
Hi, this is, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is Katie. I'm the orthopedic navigator at the hospital. This is like really helpful. I actually, part of my job is I have to audit all of the hip fractures, and they want me to kind of do more community information and fall prevention to hopefully prevent all of our hip fractures. We have 5 to 10 hip fractures in the hospital at any given time. So, and what I was noticing as I was going through actually the other day, and this timing was perfect, was that a lot of our hip fractures had recent hospitalizations or ER admissions for something unrelated. So they came in for a UTI, they got treated, they got sent home, and then they fell. So I was looking for information to provide to the ER staff and to the rest of the hospital managers on that they could give for just regular medical admissions, and make sure that they do acknowledge, patients and kind of assess for patients to be higher fall risk when they discharge them. So hopefully they don't fall and come back.
And they did have, for a while, again, that was before the pandemic, so I don't know if things have changed, but in the past, they had some of the therapists at the hospital that would sometimes go to the ER for certain patients to make sure that they could safely navigate certain things, whether it be assistive devices or just making sure that, okay, now you're going home, you had a UTI, you might feel dizzy, you need to do some alternating marching before you get up. So I don't know if they still do that, but it
They
was
do
really
still do
helpful
that.
before.
But I think just even the tips that you're giving about like the hydration and things like that are just really important to make sure that the nurses kind of mention before they discharge the patients. So that's great. It's really
And it
good
is
information.
twice your weight in ounces. My brain went to sleep on that one, but twice your weight in ounces. The goal is, if you can, try to drink a gallon of water a day, and then you make sure that you hit it.
Yeah. This is really, really good information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, Katie, that makes sense. Maybe like a fall prevention worksheet that they go out.
Yeah, I actually,
Yeah.
as we were on this, I was looking at the patient educations in Cerner, and there are 2 really good ones I just sent to all of the nursing directors. So there, we actually have one that it looks like the trauma team updated last year of fall resources. So it has all of the phone numbers for the senior center. It has home modification phone numbers, and a lot of different resources for patients that they could get in our immediate community.
Great.
Hi, Stacy. It's Liz. Nice to
Hi.
finally meet you. I thought this was great. It was so
Thank you.
comprehensive, and full disclosure, not only do I work at the Caregiver Center and with the Faith Community Nurse, but my past job was actually a physical therapist. So I really appreciated it. I think it was really, really, I don't think you missed anything. And just to share, one of the things that I have been observing, and it includes with myself and with my peers, is sort of the whole mindset, the combination of being rushed, being distracted, and sometimes using poor judgment. Like I remember one of my patients was an older woman who was vacuuming her curtains or something like that on a step ladder, and God bless her for thinking she could do that. And there's multiple incidents like that. I had somebody helping me in the house just put up a picture, my peer, and she's just like climbing onto the end table. And I said, I have a ladder. Like, we can get a ladder. Oh, no, I can do it. I'll climb on the bed and climb on this. And I think we just don't stop always and think about it. And that's just really important. I mean, there's lots of people who don't have the judgment, and that's a whole other story. And we just have to hope that people around them for that.
Correct.
But, for those of us that are just busy or distracted or just, think we're in better shape than we are, I think we have to be really, really careful.
I agree.
So what do you do, Stacy? I don't know if anything can be done for the person who, whether they have poor insight or it's a matter of pride and, will not use any kind of assistance device. How do you handle it?
So I'm pretty blunt if anybody's ever had me as a therapist. So I put the onus, okay, so if the person has cognitive issues, that's where I will put signs up, and usually in bright colors, like I'll bring Post-its and say walker so that they can remember. If it's pride, I put it back in their court and I explain to them, these are the strategies that could happen when I understand you don't want to use a walker because you don't want to be old. And then I explained to them, you're no longer 20, so you are considered old now. So as a result of that, you should be using this device. You want to go down to a walker, you want or get down to a cane or no device, then you really need to own doing your activities to make sure that you're stronger and you can do that. And I find the person that's really too proud to use a device, when you give them ownership of, you don't have to, I'm not going to make you use this, but I'm going to give you strategies. If you choose not to do that, I can't stay in as your therapist in home care if you're going to be unsafe, but I can give you the strategies to make yourself safer. And I will say that the majority of them do turn around when they realize I'm giving them their power and they can make the determination and their decision to be safe or not. But I will also point out the potential of not using that device and the possibility of injury as a result. And they get it. But again, I'm upfront and pretty blunt with what I'm saying. And for the most part, they will get it. The cognitive issue, that is a bigger thing. And sometimes I'll have families put walkers in multiple places so that, now they've walked 10 feet and be like, oh, so it might cost them a little bit more, or, they'll use a loaner closet to get an extra device. But by doing that, it increases their likelihood of follow through because they're not going to necessarily remember. If you guys were ever in loss of a cane, go to Costco and go into their office, and they have about 25 canes because people walk to the car with the basket, and they put all their stuff in, and then they get in the car and drive away. And they literally at any given time have 25 canes. And so they started giving them to the senior center and things like that because people couldn't remember where they left it.
No, I have a 95-year-old mother-in-law, cognitively intact, but won't wear hearing aids, won't use a cane, and really at this point, I think needs a walker and can't,
So the hearing aid thing is a biggie. I find a lot of people with that, but what happens when they're not using hearing aids is they actually are closing themselves out from society, and they're missing a big part of life. And then they get even more drawn into themselves. So they're looking at the fact, well, I can't do this, 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 and this. So what's the use of using a walker or a cane? So getting the hearing aids, and now they have so many that are really good where you barely can see them. But if not, just pointing out, this is going to keep you safer, because if you fall at 95, there's potential of this, and this, and just give them ownership on that.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
I don't think it could come from family though.
No, it can't, because you know what? My mother doesn't listen to me.
Yeah.
I was telling Allison, my mom had gotten hurt, and we had one of our therapists go in there, and she's like, she told me that you said this, and this. I said, I did, but I am her daughter, and therefore she will not listen. But I went to visit her a few days later, and she's like, Allison, that's our therapist. Allison said to do this, and this. And my father just sat in the corner smirking, because he knows that she's not going to listen to me, but she'll listen to somebody else. So it's always better coming from family, sort of like your kids behave better when they're in front of strangers.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you so much, Stacy.
You're welcome. Is that it?
Are there any other questions?
I just want to thank you a lot. Really, your lecture is very helpful because I fell down in 2014 and my whole thigh bone broke, and they did emergency surgery, and I have a rod. 53 stitches were and then after that, I'm trying myself to, I never fall again, but I have osteoporosis. So I'm doing these exercises which you mentioned, most of it.
Perfect.
And walking on toes and, all those stretches and all other things, but so much helpful. I was wishing to listen somebody who is professional as you are. So it's helpful. I want to listen this lecture again. I think I can, right?
Yes, they're recording it.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, we are recording the lecture, and it will be posted on the Goldstone Caregiver Center website. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, Stacy, thank you. You know,
welcome.
just as everyone has said in both the chat and to you, this was incredibly informative with so many great takeaways, so many detailed opportunities to really build, you know, strength and stability. So thank you. This was really
welcome.
helpful. It was fantastic. So thank you.
You're welcome. And Allison's back too.
And thank you, Allison, for being
You're
part of this too.
Have a
Yep.
good afternoon, everyone.
All right,
Take care.
everyone. Take care.